Okay, so in this video, we're doing some main bearing work. This particular engine is a 2530. So a 2025, a late 2025 would be very similar. There's some similarities with Wraith. You could certainly use this as somewhat of a guideline. But there are some differences with that as well. So I did want to say that the background may look a little unlike what you would find in a machine shop, and that's because I'm doing this work in the basement of our home, and I set up this area to do this type of work as a result of COVID. So anyway, now as you can see, I have things marked out, and that's in order to keep everything in a consistent placement. So I have everything red on one side, blue on the other. The shim is red, the shell is red, the cap, the crankcase, and the other shell. And the other thing is, each one of these main bearing caps is numbered. So 2W21. So the 2 means that it is the second one, of course. This is number 1. And another very important thing as you're getting things started off is that you put a relief or a chamfer in this portion of the shim. And the reason for that is because you don't want it jamming into the corner here, which can happen, and then it can cause it to force, because this isn't always a good clean corner. Sometimes it's a little bit rounded and it can catch there. So, and of course we're going to use a torque wrench because we want to get these torqued down to proper specification. So in the bottom I have the torque specifications that apply to the different engines. Since this process applies to nearly all the small horsepower engines, and you can even use this process for large horsepower as well. So I have the first one in place, and the nuts tighten down a little bit. And then what we'll notice is that we still have a gap here, an opening. Is that we still have a gap here, an opening, we'll call it, that's fairly wide. And the reason for that is that these are brand new shells. I like using new shells as opposed to remetaled shells. When they're remetaled, that's when they take the old steel shell, they clean off all the babbitt, and then they melt on new babbitt. I don't like that process because when they apply the new babbitt, when the new babbitt is applied, the shell shrinks in and it can also twist some. And so what the old school method for avoiding that was to spread out the shell, which takes care of the shrinking in part. It doesn't always take care of the twisting aspect. And but it just makes it very difficult, and then a lot of times you have to file down on the cap and on the crankcase, and that can turn into a very frustrating type situation as well. So we get brand new shells that have brand new babbitt on them. The babbitt was applied when the shell was a complete circle of metal, of steel. So they then cast the babbitt on to that. It's very unlikely for anything to twist or draw in, but after they apply the babbitt, then they can take a light machining on the different surfaces to true it back up again. So that's why I like working with new bearing shells. And of course, the people who make these shells are also very well aware of the fact that they need to use a babbitt that has a high content of tin. You don't want anything that has a lot of lead in it. So it's predominantly tin, and there's a little bit of other materials in there as well. But tin is the important thing. So yeah, and so as I've already shown, we have a bit of a gap here. So we need to reduce that gap. And what that gap is the crush on the bearing. And the crush is what holds the bearing in place. The British refer to it as nip. So the bearing is nipped in place. The outer portion of the bearing is actually slightly larger than the housing that it's clamped into. So you want that fit like that, because otherwise the shell could have a tendency to try to grab and rotate and vibrate and do all sorts of things that you don't want a bearing to do. So since you have a 2/1000 or so clearance in here, then your crankshaft will rotate in there without putting any friction onto the bearing to try to cause it to want to turn. So what we want to do is we want a 2/1000 crush or nip on the upper shell and the bottom shell as well. So you need to have a 2/1000, you want a 2/1000 feeler gauge to fit in here. Once these two are tightened to torque, and you loosen one side. So you can see it, if you look closely, that it was sort of wanting to work its way up. So now that opening is going to be even significantly more than that 15 or 16, and on both sides. So now we have somewhat of a starting point. And you can't really, in my opinion, come up with an exact amount of how much you're going to take off at this point. But what I do is I start by taking, what we'll do is we'll take 5/1000 off the upper and the lower surfaces, mating surfaces, and then we'll see where we're at there. So, and of course the bearing cap is pretty well stuck down, so you're going to need to pry it up. So yeah, so this guy aside, and I'm just going to show you, I'm going to increase the chamfer on this shim a little bit just to show you what that's like. And so I'll bring you, normally just use a typical bench grinder with a nice big flat wheel. And of course you want to make sure you have the bearing orientated in such a way that it's up. And then try to do like a little bit of a 45-degree angle. And then the other machine we're going to be using is this rod and cap grinder, which is really quite a nice machine. So now before we do our rod and cap grinding, I am going to this in a little closer maybe. I'm going to dress the wheel. Bring the camera over here to show. Hopefully you can see. This is what raises the wheel up and down. Over we're just starting to kiss it there a little bit. Turn our machine on. So now that gives us a nice flat surface. It also cleans out any babbitt that can get stuck in there. So I'm just feeling sometimes you have a little bit of a burr on there that you don't want. So it's good to have a file handy and you can dress that down. There's also a little bit of a rust preventative on here that's kind of sticky. We'll clean that off. Of course, we don't want to clean off our markings. All right. So now we have this round piece there. I don't know what exactly it's called. So we put that up in position like that. Bring the camera over to show. So it's this guy here. It's held in this with this spring, so we put that in like such. Bring the clamp in a little bit. I'm just trying to do this while holding the... So yeah, so what happens is you put your shell in there like such, making sure that you're on that shaft. And what that does is that gets the ends of the bearing nice and flat. So yeah, we just do it like that and then tighten it. And then you drop this down and out of the way. So now there's a little bit of room there yet. So we got to bring it up. So we dial up the wheel just until it starts to kiss. You can hear a little bit of noise there. So that is our 0 point. And we happen to be looking on the numbers here. We're on 36 and a half, and we're going to start off by taking 5 off. So we'll go to 42, and then we'll see how it goes. And you don't want to do heavy cuts. Maybe 1 or 2 thousandths at a time. Heavy cuts are just going to cause the shell to maybe migrate up and things become uneven. So we'll just say that you were warned. It'll also cause more babbitt to get jammed into the wheel. All right. So we got that one skimmed. You also don't want to get too much heat onto the babbitt or the shell, which would be has a result of doing too hard of a cut. Now we're just going to back this one down a little bit. See if it starts to hit. Just a little bit. Okay, so we have a very, very fine hit there. And in this case, we're at 36. Do this one at 42 as well. So now we take our shells back. All right, so now we're going to see what effect we have here. So just to show how my markings work, we have the blue and the blue. So can't go that way. That'd be blue against red. Can't go that way. Has to go that way. So now we're sure we have the right shell going in the right area. So we get this down in. Put our shim on top of there. Take our cap, and again, we have our color orientations. We make sure it starts to go down. All right. We'll tighten them down. Try to go very even with it. When you're just taking up a lot, you know, just try to do a rhythm and go by feel and alternate. Okay, so we got them torqued down. Tight. And now we loosen one side. So you don't want necessarily dead loose. You can then back it off and then tighten it up as tight as you can by hand. Then we take our feeler. So we can get a 14 easily down in the bottom. Even a 15. Even a 16. So I'm going to mark that 16. Not loving this Sharpie. Oh, here it goes. And if you don't mark it, you lose track which one was where, and etc., etc. So now let's see what the top one is. There's a 13. There's a 12. 11. So, and this is why I like to skip all the way to a 6 here. Huh? Not quite there. So this is why I like to just do that very small amount initially. So it looks like I might need to go for another feeler here. I also have, oh, let's see this one. 10, 14, 16, and 8, 7, 6. There's a 5. Okay, so I'm getting a 5 in there pretty good. That's a nice fit. I'm gonna put a 5 up here. It's also good to check the back side as well. You can have some unevenness. In this case, I can feel that it's... And that can also be from the bottom shell pushing up on a strain. So on the back side, I'm at like a 3 or even a 4. This side. This back side is still a 16. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to take any more off of this particular top shell on this side, at least. Tighten it back up. It'll still probably need a little bit more taken off. We're going to hold off on that for the moment. Now let's see what we got on this side. See, now I can get, that's a 14. That's an 18. As that one goes. 18. Okay, so I'm going to call this bottom one a 19. This top one is... I'm going to call it a 24 for now. Alright, so now you're probably wondering, well, why you have this unevenness. That could probably be because when they parted the bearing shells, they didn't do it in the exact center line. And the pin is causing it to stay located in a certain area. At least the pin on either side. We have our markings in there, so we know how much we have to remove. And as you can see, it's a long process. things move a little quicker. As you do more of them as you're progressing along, because then you have a better idea how much you're going to end up taking off. Okay. And you want to be in the habit of, particularly with the shims, of laying them down in the position that they came out of. Otherwise, you can flip it without realizing it. So now we have 19 on this side, 16 on this side. So I'm going to say we're going to take another 5 off. And you can feel, take another 5 off of this one and see where it comes in at. And on this one, we have a fair amount on one side. So I'm only going to take probably 5 off on that side. All right, so this one I can do both sides 5. Get that over there. Both sides 5. Starting to hit a little, so I backed it off. You can barely hear it kissing now. So I'll call that our 0 point. Right at 35, so we're going to go to 40. Sometimes you get a little warm, so be ready. I also feel a little tiny burr on starting to develop, so I'm just going to do a very light grind on that. So now on this one, this is the upper shell. I'm going to take 5 off only on the top. And I'm going to start to center this hole a little bit better, the pinhole. So 5 on the top, the blue side. Little bit of a burr there and on that side I'll dress that down. If you're very careful and very good with a bench grinder, you can do this. If not, use a file. I'm old school enough that I sharpen drill bits on a bench grinder. So that's how I feel comfortable using a grinder in such a setting. All right. So now we're going to do just like we did before. Another thing you got to be very careful of is that the shell, the bearing shell, is up into the cap and down into the crankcase far enough that it's not hanging up some on that pin or the dowel. Otherwise, that dowel is going to try to force its way down into the shell and give you all kinds of grief. So 3 swings each side. Start feeling some tightness there. And go nice and even. Good and tight. Loosen one side. And let's see how much of a difference we made. So we still have our numbers on there, so we can reference them. We'll start with a 12 on the bottom. 12 snug. And a 13 is not going. So now we change our 16 in here, cross that off, put a 12. And where are we at the top? Now we were at, I think it was 5. The other one for that one. So now remember, we didn't take anything off on this side. Now, as a result of taking some from this side, we had an effect on this side. So now it's up to, I'm going to call it a 7. Oh, it might have been a 3 before, but now it's a 7. So we're going to put our 7 right there. We're going to tighten down this side. Loosen up this side. Let's see what kind of change we made here. Okay, it's an 11 down there. We'll mark that with an 11. Pretty wide up top now. That's an 18. So we still may be $20. Yeah. So this upper one is a 20. Went from a 24 to a 20. Okay. So now we repeat the process. Hopefully now you understand how much fun this is. But like I say, as you move along down the row, you'll get a little quicker and smoother at it. But you're going to have a fair amount of time into the process. So we got a 12 on one side and an 11 on the other. So I'm going to do 4. I'm going to take 4 off. Other side, other portion there. So now on this one we have a 20 and a 7. And again, it's the blue side that has the higher number. So I'm going to do... I think I'm going to take as much as 7 off on the blue side this time. right. So now we're starting to get to the point where we got a lot of numbers in there, and we'll have to think about cleaning some off. But sometimes having the progression of the markings of the numbers in there helps to give you your mind an idea of how much you're taking off and where you were the last time. So again, get that snug down there. Make sure your bearing, whoops, cap stays So now you might be asking yourself, why is it this way? Why can't we just get a bearing shell in there like we do when we're rebuilding our small block Chevy engine or something like that? And the reason for that is because in the case of a small block Chevy, that's a mass production constructed engine. And with mass production, tolerances are held much, much closer. They may be working to a 1/10. Whereas with things that are not mass produced, in this case a Rolls-Royce pre-war engine, they rely on the fitter to do this type of work. A skilled fitter. And the good news about that is that you have less possible failure or quality control issues. Because the fitter may say, well, you know, the guy who made these bearings was off a little bit here or something, and, you know, something needs to be corrected there. All right, so now we got 8 on top and bottom here, a good old 8. So we're closing in on it. And we're evening out the score, which is nice. We're evening out the shells. 8 and 8. Lucky old 8. And another thing is you want to work up to the 2000s. If you happen to miss the 2000s, then you're going to end up having to file either the crankcase or the rod cap, and that becomes a lot more trickier and a lot more difficult. So remember, I warned you about that. If you have to file a little bit on the crankcase, you have to take the stud out. And you have to be very, very good with the file. Okay, so that bottom one is 7. The other thing with filing those areas, you only can take a little bit off. If you take too much off, then when you go to bore your bearing shells, you can bore right through the babbitt and go right to the steel. Don't ask me how I know that. This one's still a little wide. maybe and you don't want to force the feeler in there. I'm going to call that one a 12. All right. So I'm going to break this side loose. I'm going to take a little break. I'm going to take a little drink and whatnot. And I just wanted to leave everything where it is now, and then these are loosened, so I know both of them are loose. And so what I'm going to do when I come back is I'll then proceed to skim down those and do the process again. So we're closing in on it. Okay, so before my break, we were closing in on our nip setting here. So I have these nuts loose. So we still have a little bit more to skim off of these. And this is when things get really critical, and again, you don't want to go past your number. You want to get right up to it. So another little trick I'll show you about the upper shell when it's stuck in. Sometimes that makes it a little easier to bring it out. Okay, so on the, I'm calling it the lower shell, it's really the upper shell, but being upside down, it's the other way around. Okay, so we have 8 on one side, and we have a 7 on the other. So I'm going to take 2 off, and I'm going to see what that's going to get us. And on this one, we have, what is that? Oh. We have 12 on one side and 8 on the other. So we'll come back to that one. So again, I'm going to take 2 off of this one because I want to get up slowly to the number. I don't want to go past it. This one. And on this one we have an 8 and a 12. So I feel comfortable with taking think I'm going to do 4. Okay, so I chickened out a little, and I did 3.5. I think at this stage what I can do is I can erase these other numbers. So that they're not getting confused. Like I say, we're closing in on it. So, you can even tell with tightening up the nuts how they just come right up a lot quicker. At a 9. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim down that one that's a 9. I'll take 3 off of it and see what that gets me. So that one is the 9, the blue on the lower. And the other one is we're closing in on, so I don't want to disturb those yet until I get this 9 evened down, you know, to where they're all just about a 5. All right, so blue, we're going to take off 3, probably more like 3.5 on just the blue. One, 2, see what that gets us. So again, I want to do it this way because I want to even out those loads, because those 5s could change as a result of changing this one. The other thing you want to do is make sure that your nuts and studs have a nice free threads. So as you can see, he's really zonked down quickly now. Alright, we'll check this side first, see what we get. We should be pretty close to 5 all the way around. Alright, so that one might be a 6. No, I think I'll call them, because here's a 6. I have a damaged 6. I think I'm going to call them all a 5 right there. So these are a 5. Up this torque a little bit too. And then these should be a 5. Okay, so that one tightened up a little bit. So it's either a loose 4 or a tight 5. That one loosened up a little bit. That one might be more like a 7. Yeah. See, so that turned to a 7. Yep. And that one stayed the same. And that one up there, what was that one again? That one, I said it loosened. Yes, that one's more like a 4 now. So like I say, things, the numbers get a little strange when you start getting into this range here. Feel her a little better there. So I got a 7. Ooh. And a 5. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 off on the blue side, or on the red side on this one. 2 off on the red side. Let's see what that gets me. So what I'm saying, when I'm only doing one side, I'm only swinging it in far enough to get that one edge in there. Okay, check out red first. Guessing we're probably gonna be at like 3 or 4. Okay, that upper one might be a 3. No, tight 3. So it's probably a 2. Yeah. It's a nice 2 right there. So we achieved our desired effect on that one. We got there on this guy. We got 2. Alright. Bottom one here. Might be a good 5. Yeah. Bottom one's a 5 plus if you wanted to really be technical about it. Alright, let's see what's going on with the other side. Alright, so this side is probably a 3. This side lower. This one down here. This one down here I'm going to say is a loose 5. So we got a 5 and a 3. Okay. So we're slowly closing in on it. So we got 5 and 5. So I'm just going to try to take maybe 2 thousandths off. That can be 2 thousandths on both sides, meaning blue and red. So now we want to be sure. So it says barely in contact, so that's good. That's a good place to measure out from. 1. And I think I'm going to do a half, 1 and a half. I'm going to change it instead of doing a whole 2. I'd rather creep up on it a little bit slower. I felt like that one cut was a little heavier than I had anticipated. And all sorts of things like that. Now there are cases where they filed off so much off of the crankcase and so much off of the end caps that you can use thicker shims, especially made thicker shims in that case, and then you're saving a crankcase, and that's acceptable to an extent. But if you're using a standard thickness shim and then you decide to put a shim in there, that can lead to problems. In the case of somebody who doesn't do this regularly, if they do miss their mark, my recommendation is to get another shell and start the process over again with that one. I know that was the last thing some people want to hear, but let's see what we got. All right, so that one's still somewhat of a 5. This upper one is still at a good 2. So that one, this side didn't really change much. I guess maybe just skimmed a little too light on it. And that one is still, it's a tighter 5 though. And that one's probably a good solid 2. So yeah, that's a nice 2. So, oh that's right. So, so the lower shell, since our engine is upside down, we're good there. So now we got to go back to this one. It's got 5 on both sides. I'm just going to skim 1 thousandths off each. See if we can close in that gap. Alright. Alright. Come with me, my little friend. I'm going to do like 1/1000 or so. A little brave to add in that half. Clear off our marking there. Clear off this one too. So now, just so people know, once you get your nip set on all of them, then you can set up to a line bore them. And there's a little bit of a drag on there. We'll put 3 here. And we'll put 2 on that side as well, big 2. Okay, nice big 2. All right. So I'm going to torque this one down. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave it like that. Even though we have a 3 down here, I'm going to let it sit like that for a little bit and see if things sort of stretch and settle. Because 3 is so close to 2, and it was even a little bit of a snug 3. Then I'm going to move on to the next one, and then at a later time, maybe after 24 hours or more, I'll come back, check this again, see if anything has changed. And because it could turn into a much tighter 3, or, you know, getting closer to a 3 as things kind of settle and stretch and all. So, okay, so now we're going to move on to the next one. See if I can maybe do this one at a different camera view to make it a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to say it took about an hour and a half, maybe total, to do that first one. As you get moving along on these next ones, they'll go quicker. So, you know, don't get too, at least in most cases, so at least don't get too frustrated. All right. I'll take this guy off. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to chamfer the edges of these two. And when I carry these over, I want to make sure I'm holding them upright so I know I'm chamfering the right edge. I'll be back.